So we're recording, but I'll chop off the beginning
Yeah.
um, as we decide what we're actually doing.
Yes. Good luck with that.
Yeah. And I'm going to keep my questions really short because the criticism I got for the last video when I interviewed the Syria guy was that someone went to the trouble of writing a comment on the YouTube saying, "This is really interesting, but I just can't stand watching it because of the endless long questions and
Yeah, they were
prevarication."
they were brutal to you, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I hope you've recovered from that.
Yeah. Well, we get used to it, don't we? Don't we, TJ?
I never did.
No, no, we'll probably die early through being nice people who get destroyed by others.
Yeah, it's another of the disease of despair, along with smoking and drinking.
Yep. Well, at least they're great fun.
Yeah, but so is this. No.
Yeah. For everyone out there, this is TJ Coles. This is the book that we wrote together in 2018. Union Jackboot. What your
Boo.
What do you mean, boo? It's
I
our
mean,
pension.
yeah.
It's our pension plan. And the subtitle is "What Your Media and Professors Don't Tell You About British Foreign Policy." Do you know what? I think that we made a mistake with that. What your media and professors. We're not saying that professors are the problem, really, are we? Or we were saying that schools.
Oh, they're the
Although,
they're the worst of all those fucking professors.
why
I
do you
think
say
you
that?
you've got the fucked up version there that was unproofread, and don't let anyone see that, for
This,
Christ's
this is
sake.
this is worth a shitload of money, though, TJ. The one with the black edges. It's stylish. Anyway,
It's
let's not go down that route.
a mark of quality, Matt. A mark of quality.
Yeah. So why are the professors worse than the teachers?
Well, they're a bunch of knobheads, aren't they, to use a parlance? No, I think obviously they have to teach in a way that's expected of them within a certain criteria. And if they deviate from that, they can risk losing funding, being ostracized, etc. And it doesn't really have anything to do with politics or a particular kind of censorship. It's just a culture. For example, if you're in a Christian university and there's a professor saying, well, this is a bunch of crap, Christ probably didn't exist, and if he did, he wasn't the Son of God, that professor is probably not going to get very far in their career at a Christian university. Or if it's whatever, imagine there is such a thing as a Marxist university. If there are professors extolling the virtues of capitalism, they're not going to get very far. So in any kind of
Or even just saying Marx.
what a prick. Yeah. And I think the same applies in our so-called Western democracies. If you start pointing out facts like there are intelligence agencies that operate with hidden budgets and are almost completely shielded and protected behind the veils of national security. So they can do whatever they like in the interests of banks and investors and imperialism. That doesn't fit well with the image of a Western democracy. So, by the same logic as the atheist in a Christian university, these professors are going to be marginalized. And we see evidence of that all the time. There are plenty of real, what you might call dissident professors who go against the grain. And if they don't lose funding and have trouble with their colleagues, they end up getting attacked from the outside. Like David Miller is one good example where he was dragged, what do they call it? Raked over the coals by the Zionist lobby for his statements of fact about Israeli foreign policy.
Yeah. Well, I don't ask questions anymore, so I'm just letting you talk. But
Yeah, that's not a good idea. If you
so when
want
you
more
say
than one person to watch this, you should interrupt me as much as possible.
it's all to get more than one person is fairly well, I think we'll probably get more than one, but so what the I'll cut that bit out. Don't worry. It's all
No,
gonna
keep
be
in all. In fact, do the worst of and Keep instead of the best of, just keep all the garbage and cut any time we happen to do a good bit, just cut that out and
Okay.
keep in the worst.
So when you say that there is a criteria for what is allowed to be said or what can't be said, are you saying that there's an explicit criteria, or is it just sort of an unspoken thing, or what?
Sometimes there are explicit criteria. For example, if an academic receives funding, they obviously had to put a proposal together. And if they deviate too much from that proposal, the people funding it are not going to be happy that they've basically done whatever they wanted with this third party money. So that's an example where academics are obliged to at least stick within some kind of boundaries. And universities have their own codes of conduct and ethical guidelines and so on. So if academics stray from those, in theory, they can face consequences for that. And quite paradoxically, some of those codes of conduct explicitly safeguard freedom of speech, and yet in reality, we find increasing numbers of academics being cancelled.
Which includes you and includes David Miller and includes I don't know who else would be on your list, but um, tell us a bit more about that.
What happened to me, if anyone is really bored one day, they can read on Counterpunch. I wrote a long article about what happened there, but I wasn't actually studying politics at all at Plymouth University. I was researching blindness and visual impairment, and politics was something I was doing in my spare time. So it was even less reason to get rid of me. But basically, what happened is I can't prove it's him, but and he doesn't deny this because he doesn't answer me. But somebody called Cornel Sandvos, I forget where he's teaching now, but he's actually received British government money for investigating what's called misinformation and disinformation,
Right.
if I'm remembering this correctly. So, in my opinion, it's likely that he was researching so-called misinformation and disinformation, and he came across this Australian publication called Nexus
Nexus.
magazine. Yes.
Mhm.
And he saw my name in there, and he saw that in my biography that I was associated with Plymouth University. And in my opinion, I believe it was him. He complained to an old PhD examiner of mine called Jane Grant. And she started circulating this email. This I can prove because I have all the emails, thanks to a friend of mine who was copied into them. She started attacking my character, saying Coles is crazy, basically writing conspiracy theories, etc., for Nexus magazine. But what conspiracy theories? Nothing was ever specified, and what the etc. was, I don't know. But anyway, basically, the staff conspired against this alleged conspiracy theorist to lock me out of my email account and let my contract run out with no intention of renewing it. And I was working off campus. So it was Orwellian in the sense of the censorship, but it was also Kafkaesque in the sense of not even being able to face your accuser or being known what you're being accused of. And I think it's signaling a, a direction now where so-called conspiracy theorists are now a possible danger to society in the eyes of the state. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm far from right wing. I'm pretty much old school leftist. So the idea that conspiracy theories have now become part of the right wing culture is obviously concerning. If you look at something like QAnon, the massive phenomena in America, But there's also a conspiracy theory in that, in the sense that if you look at the people behind QAnon, they're connected to intelligence. They're either CIA contractors or retired CIA, quote unquote, or retired NSA, or supposedly ex-military intelligence. So that in itself seemed to be a big psyop. It might have been originally to create momentum for Donald Trump, but then it was co-opted to try and discredit the Make America Great Again movement. But that's another
Why
story.
would they? Why would they do that though? Have one aim at the beginning and then a second, and then a completely contradictory aim. Isn't it more likely just that the CIA people who are associated with that MAGA movement, there's just quite a lot of paranoid people who work for the intelligence agencies, and they retire from their intelligence agencies and then go and do some other mad thing.
Well, looking at the chronology of who was behind it seemed to be quite a lot of pro-Trump people at the beginning. And it's been pretty much explicitly stated that by numerous CIA and ex-CIA, etc., that Trump is considered a threat to American national security. So they would certainly have an interest in taking what was possibly a pro-Trump movement at the beginning and then infiltrating it to make it not only anti-Trump, but to completely discredit MAGA in the eyes of the American public, which didn't work, obviously, because the what became the opposition, the Joe Biden-led Democrats, were something to behold. But anyway, that's what generally has become of the so-called conspiracy culture, if such a thing exists. It's been pretty much subsumed, and it's now considered to be a right-wing phenomenon. But it never used to be that way. Particularly in the United States in the 60s, there were always right-wing groups like the John Birch Society that were pushing conspiracy theories, but generally the so-called conspiracy theories tended to come from the left because if you look at the Black Panthers or the Civil Rights Movement, for example, the key figures in there were being directly persecuted by the FBI and to, as far as we know, a lesser extent, the CIA, but certainly the FBI, the counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO. Phones were being tapped, letters were being forged to try and create discord within groups. In fact, the FBI, I think in the early 70s, they even went so far as to set up a fake Chinese communist group with instructions to make the doctrine of the group so obscure and so boring that it just put people off the idea of communism. I mean, it doesn't mean much in itself, this example, because it's only one example, but it's just a nice little phrase that I found. It was some kind of hippie from the 60s who referred to the right-wing drift as the bend in the river towards the right wing. So Alex Jones, by the 90s, became the superstar of the conspiracy movement. And by then, so-called conspiracy theories were mostly a phenomena of the right wing. And this has been an amazing propaganda weapon because anybody who questions the secrecy of the state and the operations of military and intelligence, if they can be associated with silliness like David Icke's reptilians or Alex Jones's ranting, it not only makes the entire idea that there can be secret things going on seem ridiculous, but it also acts as obviously a very good diversion, so that people end up following things that are almost certainly not true, and instead ignoring things that very likely could be true.
So we wrote our book, Union Jackboot, in 2018. And that was largely based on you doing exactly what you're talking about, which is investigating secret or at least semi-secret, fairly well hidden government documentation particularly as regards UK foreign policy. What's happened to that research, and where has your research gone since then?
I never had access to secret documents, and there's nothing like that in the book. It was all open source, which is the most amazing thing. In fact, Liam Fox, who was the defense secretary, he said, if you wish to keep a secret, the best place to speak it is in Parliament, because that's the least likely place it'll be reported.
I mean, you can then rewrite as well. If you're an MP, you can rewrite Hansard to if you've misspoken or whatever. You can rewrite the parliamentary record. I don't know if that's ever had any serious consequences, the actual rewriting of the parliamentary record, but they are
Yes,
allowed to do
well,
that.
I know Norman Baker, who's a friend of mine, was telling me that he checked some of the transcripts himself and was quite appalled to learn that they're not accurately recording what he's saying sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not surprised about that. So with regard to what happened to the research after, about a year after we wrote the book, complaining that nobody was giving much time or effort to British foreign policy, along
Except you.
comes UK Declassified,
Mm.
and they rather torpedoed my efforts to be a one-man band critique of UK foreign policy. So I was rather my efforts were rather redundant after that, because they're a very
Well,
successful website. So
they are a very successful website, and they've done it brilliantly. But I like to think that, we were there a year before other people were doing that. I mean, the only
oh
historian I
yes,
can think of who was really doing that was, as we talk about in the book itself, was Mark Curtis, and he was doing
yes.
historical stuff. So I think what you did in your book on Britain's Secret Wars in 2017 was pioneering, and I think I capitalized on that by this absolute money spinner, Union Jackboot, the following year. And just because another group has took over that role in 2019, I still think that you should be very very pleased with what you did in that body of material.
Well, that's kind of you, sir, but I can never be pleased.
That's a topic for another interview. Why can TJ Coles never be pleased?
Yes.
Okay, so you've kind of left that research behind in the sense that Declassified has taken over that role over the past 5 years or so. Um, so what, and you've mentioned Norman Baker, the former MP, I believe, who's written a lot about assassinations or alleged assassinations and conspiracies, and you've kind of taken up that role as well. Now, I have seen you on a few occasions over the past few years, and we have talked briefly about some of these conspiracy theories, but I'm pretty ignorant of what you've done here. Would you mind giving us a sense of where your research has gone?
Well, I'll try, but I'm pretty ignorant about what I've been doing as well, actually. It's, I suppose you could call it, in the field of propaganda, you could call it kind of assassination hypocrisy or something like that, because um, if you look, for example, at mainstream British media and American media as well, they're very quick to point out suspicious deaths that occur in enemy states, particularly in Russia. And I
Mm.
think you and I would probably agree with that, that when there's a list of people that are enemies of Putin and they die, they've probably been bumped off, because it's an authoritarian regime, it's a criminal regime, and it's logical that Putin and the FSB are going to be assassinating political enemies.
I think
It's
that's right. Although sometimes there are ambiguities on a whole range of cases. So, for instance, in the case of Navalny, I think even the Ukrainian authorities, weeks after the autopsy, said, "Oh yeah, it was just poor health." Um, and in the case of President Kennedy, I think there are ambiguities as well, because if he was shot from the grassy knoll, as the popular theory goes, there's no exit wound going out the back of his head on the tape. So I think across the board with assassination conspiracies, it's there are ambiguities. And I suppose one question I'd ask you to reflect on as you go through your examples is how confident are you of the case for criminal intent and there being a crime?
Well, as you often did in Union Jackboot, you took the words out of my mouth, because that's where I was going to lead to, that the whole point of a political assassination is to make it look like it wasn't an assassination. So that already creates a problem for investigators, because for sure, some or many of these deaths can be, acts of nature or accidents, legitimately so. And others could be assassination. There's very rarely any proof. That's why in law, for example, when there's no absolute proof in a court case, it's often decided by weight of evidence,
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
as we know, can be very flawed, which is a
Mm-hmm.
contradiction in academia and journalism, or hypocrisy, because the same academics and journalists who broadly accept the standards of a courtroom don't accept the same standards for a conspiracy theory. I mean, if you're talking about reptilians and so on, forget it. But if you're talking about something that could actually be real, you provide a weight of evidence, and it's although it might be circumstantial, it's still a strong weight of evidence. It could apply in a court of law, and it will be dismissed simply because it's got the label conspiracy theory. Whereas if it was given a different label and presented in a court of law, it might actually win a case. So for sure, we can never know, because, in fact, talking of Norman Baker, I have his book on David Kelly, the weapons inspector, and on the back, Norman quotes purportedly a KGB expression: "Anyone can commit a murder, but it takes an artist to commit a suicide."
That's a really good line. I hadn't seen
Yeah.
that. What a Norman.
So that's, when you're dealing with professional assassins, that's already creates an ambiguity, because as distinct from murders abroad, when the government has a assassination list of alleged purported terrorists, and they simply fire Hellfire missiles from Predator or Reaper drones or whatever they've renamed them now. They don't bother to deny that, except to say that we were targeting a terrorist, but we accidentally killed some people and it's collateral damage, and we're very sorry. But when it's Western democracies killing people allegedly within their own nation, in which domestic laws apply, and of course standards of purported democracy, that necessitates secrecy, obviously, because it would completely shatter any confidence that people might have in the establishment. People don't like or trust politicians, obviously, elected politicians. If you look at public opinion polls, I haven't looked for quite a while now, but the last ones I've seen fairly consistently showed that people tend to trust more local politicians, such as councillors, than they do members of parliament, and for good reason. So politicians and tabloid journalists as well actually have a very bad reputation among the public. I think estate agents were in there as well for low levels of trust.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it's like now, but police and members of basically the security state, military, the clergy, they tended to have higher levels of trust among the public. And these institutions are more permanent fixtures of the so-called democracy, or the administrative state, you might say, because they help, for better or worse, they help to keep the country going. And they're often not elected members of the police force and the intelligence agencies, the military, and so on. So if it was found time after time that these organizations had been on a fairly regular basis committing political assassination domestically, it's harder to find pretexts and justifications for that. It's easy to justify murdering people abroad by calling them terrorists, because there's obviously an element of racism in that when it's foreigners, and xenophobia. And of course, if you can portray people as being a threat to your security, and plus there's obviously a lot of media censorship, so the foreign enemies are dehumanized. But it's within the interests of the state to obviously outright deny any domestic political assassination. But I think it's fairly logical to say that if enemy states are murdering their own people for whatever reason, then our own governments would be doing it as well. And David Kelly's an obvious example. That was one of Norman's major projects a few years after it happened. This was a weapons inspector that had been working for decades, actually, for the British government, and had a really high and esteemed reputation among colleagues for being an expert in biological warfare. And he was briefing journalists. And then after the invasion of Iraq in 2003, he ended up dead, supposedly of suicide. But the anti-war movement basically portrayed Kelly as a hero, saying he was a whistleblower and that's why he was killed. And the more establishment researchers and journalists would say, well, of course he took his own life because he was dragged in front of a committee and humiliated, so he killed himself in a feeling of shame and guilt. But I never believed in either of those explanations. They didn't seem right, because Kelly had been authorized to brief journalists, so there wasn't anything new in what he was doing. And he always maintained that Iraq was a threat, so he was pushing the government line. And he was briefing journalists anyway, as he always had been. So I do believe he was assassinated. Whether it was by the British state or the Americans, I'm not sure. But I think there's something else going on there that's not been fully investigated. For example, he had some kind of relationship with an American spy called Mai Pedersen, and I wondered if it might have
What's that
had
about?
anything to do with that.
I haven't
Well,
heard about that before.
she was military translator, I think a Kuwaiti, Iraqi American translator, and her ex-husbands and colleagues basically said, yeah, she's a spy. And David Kelly had become a member of the Baha'i faith, religion, whatever you want to call it, which is quite active in Iran. And in my opinion, it's very likely that that organization is being supported by intelligence as a way to undermine the Islamic theocracy in Iran, to undermine the clerics. And so apparently Kelly and Mai Pedersen were going to buy a house together or something like that. So, but they seem to have both been involved in Operation Rockingham, I think it was called. There were a couple of operations that involved getting American weapons inspectors to plant false information in the media. And Scott Ritter, the famous American Marine, was part of this and blew the whistle on it. And it's very likely that Kelly was involved in that as well.
So why was I don't quite understand how all those things patched together. For a start, I thought that David Kelly I thought he was married for a start.
Yes, he was.
But you're saying he was perhaps involved in some way with this American spy. But also, how did Operation Rockingham lead to his assassination? What? I mean, surely it sounds like he's on the side of the British establishment, because he's supporting the idea of Iraq being a threat, and he's supporting the idea of undermining the mullahs in Iran.
Yeah. So that's exactly why I think there's a big question mark about why he was assassinated. First of all, what makes us think he was assassinated? If you look at the details of the death, which is supposedly a suicide, they're quite preposterous, and a few people who, few medical professionals that look into it believe it was a suicide. So it's very likely, based on the weight of medical evidence, very likely to have been a murder. And then the question as to why. I think there's a big missing piece of the story that should be investigated. But in the in my looking into assassination propaganda, if you want to call it that, I've come up with some reasons for potential assassination, and having knowledge of biological and chemical weapons seems to be one, because in Norman's book, The Strange Death of David Kelly, he has a list of really like a dozen other scientists involved in biochemical warfare and research who ended up dead within the same sort of time frame of David Kelly. There was a Don Wiley, age 58, who, quoting Norman, supposedly fell from a bridge in Memphis and was reported missing. There was a Vladimir Pashnik, 64, leading microbiologist, who allegedly had a stroke. Robert M. Schwartz, 57, found murdered in his Virginia home. Set Van Guyen, probably butchering that pronunciation, sorry, 44, found dead in an airlock in an Australian laboratory. And these, it goes on and on like this. So the number of deaths of people involved in that field around the same time would suggest there was an assassination program. But as we were saying before, it's very difficult to prove that. So you have to take each death and look into it on the merits. So
Yeah. So you think that it's not actually like the British government or MI5 or MI6 or anything that killed David Kelly, but something that none of us really quite understand, some kind of internal politics that's really skewed that. That reminds me a little bit of what happens with the Skripals, where the allegation is that Russian agents came in to bump them off with radioactive material, but it was ineffective. And then there have been conspiracy theories by people like Craig Murray, who have come in and said, well, this explanation doesn't make any sense at all. So it has to have been something else. But in both those cases, um, the David Kelly one and the Skripal case in Salisbury, it sounds like the investigators into it, like you and Norman and Craig Murray, are saying, well, the official story is definitely inaccurate, but actually there's something else going on that we just don't really understand. Do you agree on both of those cases?
yeah, for sure with Kelly, and nothing with the Skripal affair makes sense either. So I would suggest there's a lot of missing pieces that we don't know. But for sure, it's not the story that we've been told. But yeah, biochemical warfare, people involved in researching weapons tend to end up dead. It's quite a dangerous job. There's also, just looking at a list I mocked up, child trafficking. People that look into that and try to expose that tend to end up dead. There was Gareth Williams, who was
Oh, the
the
spy in the bag. Is that the
yeah, the
spy in the
spy
bag?
in the bag, the GCHQ. Do you call it cryptologist or cryptographer? I've forgotten. But he was supposedly a maths genius who ended up getting recruited into GCHQ. There was was it the New York Post? Yeah. Um, there was sources in the New York Post claiming that through his work at GCHQ, he had information about Jeffrey Epstein and political blackmail.
Wow.
Which, yeah, which if that's true, would certainly tie into or put him on the list of people who try to investigate child trafficking and end up dead. There
So
was
just for viewers who may have not come across this case before, because I think it's 20 years old, that case now, 2006, I believe.
2010. He was
2010. Oh, okay,
yeah,
not quite so old.
found in the bag.
15 years. So Gareth Williams was a spy who supposedly, for kind of autoerotic reasons or something, climbed into a suitcase and zipped it closed and then suffocated. But obviously, the a very common theory is that he was just murdered and then stuck into a suitcase. A horrendous, disturbing case. But you're saying that there's new evidence that ties him to the Epstein situation, and yeah, and
Possibly, yeah. I think
how much do you believe that?
I'd give it 50-50 because these, if I remember correctly, they're anonymous sources, and it's published in a tabloid. I think the New York Post is a tabloid, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I think it's Murdoch owned as well. Yeah.
So, but then there are similar stories, so it definitely fits a
Mm.
pattern. The other theory is that Russia killed him because there had been witnesses claiming that Russian vehicles had been seen in the area. But at the moment, I'd lean more towards the Epstein connection.
So
Um,
what? Aren't there cases that you have specifically investigated? I think when we met last time, you were investigating. Was it the death of an MP from the 80s? I'm trying to remember now.
yes, yeah.
And have there been other ones that you've got specific new information on? Because you literally wrote the book on that particular case.
Yes, I'll just finish on this if that's all right.
Mm.
Um, so there's I gave some examples of the biochemical warfare scientists who end up dead. Uh, People who look into child trafficking. Nancy Schaefer was state senator in Georgia, United States state, not the country of Georgia, and she was looking into the child protective services, which have allegedly been taking children to exploit them. And she ended up dying in what the police ruled was a murder suicide with her husband. So that's another interesting case.
Mm.
Um, there are some people, frankly, it's too dangerous to talk about them, but there's one person in Belgium who's known as the Belgian Epstein, Mark de True, and he was basically a kind of thug who had been recruited by higher ups to kidnap and traffic children to elites, and that was part of a blackmail operation. And this got exposed in Belgium in the 90s and led to a record like 300,000 people going to the parliament to protest. But anyway, there's a documentary which has English subtitles, and it's something like the Dutroux murders, and it's a long list of witnesses who ended up dead in suspicious circumstances before they could testify against Dutroux.
Mm.
Another interesting thing I came across is cryptocurrency. I don't know or care much anything about crypto, but apparently a lot of CEOs and founders of crypto companies are ending up dead. So that's also something interesting to look into. Gerald Cotton, Matthew Mellon, there's a long list of these people who they die from drownings or helicopter crashes, and it seems to be within a short space of time. So it might possibly be that the banking industry is threatened by cryptocurrencies, or if a lot of these are non-Americans, it might be that the American state financial system feels threatened by crypto, but that's something that's worth looking into. And
Mm.
one of the people who ended up dead, Nikolai Meshegian, I'm probably mispronouncing that, died in 2022 in Puerto Rico. And he had actually just tweeted out that the CIA and Mossad are about to blackmail me in a sexting operation. And like within a day of tweeting that, he ended up dead. So that's also interesting. Um, businesses, possibly people getting murdered because they blow the whistle on businesses. There was a couple of Boeing whistleblowers that you might have heard of recently who ended up dead. John Barnett had blown the whistle on safety issues at the Boeing Corporation and supposedly ended up committing suicide. Journalists. There's a documentary I saw recently called The Octopus Murders. I don't know if you know about
Oh
that.
yeah, I've heard of them. Is that Danny Casolaro?
That's the one, yeah. He supposedly slashed his wrists in 1991 in a hotel room,
Mm.
despite telling people that if something happens to me, it will not be an accident. He was getting death threats.
Yeah, but
And
if something happens to me, it will be an accident. I'm extremely cat-handed.
But anyway, he basically found this incredible network of going back to
It's computer software, wasn't it?
biological.
Promise.
Well, yeah, it started off as an early kind of internet that could allow different operating systems to connect and interface with each other, and it had been hacked by the government and then sold abroad with backdoors so that the American government could use it to hack into foreign computer systems. But from that, he found all manner of things going on. There were CIA people working on Native American reservations, so there wasn't federal jurisdiction, so they could use them as a front for arms manufacturing and chemical warfare production. And he ended up dead. And many other people did as well, hence the name of the documentary, The Octopus Murders. But I think the people that made that ripped you off, Matt, because in your documentary about Gary Devore, wasn't it, the writer with no hands, you do this interesting technique of like blending fiction and reality in points. And they were starting to do that in exactly the same way. So I think it was part of your thing to question, is Matt slipping into madness? The boat had already sailed on that. But they were doing exactly the same thing in this documentary, the documentary makers. So I thought, oh, they've been influenced by you there, I think.
Yeah, was that one from about 2018, 2019? I think I've seen that one
I
at the
think so,
time,
yeah.
but yeah, I'm still waiting for a, I don't know, conspiracy theory documentaries and films really have to be very good to blow me away. I mean, obviously there have been films that are conspiracy fact, if you like Oliver Stone's JFK and Nixon, and that are just absolutely brilliant. But I seem to remember a few of them, I think including that one, may have just sort of slightly passed me by because it's sort of same old, same old.
Yeah.
Um,
And then, yes, as you were saying, politicians.
yeah.
Obviously, JFK is the major one. And there's also, around JFK, there are supposedly a lot of witnesses and people who knew what was going on ended up dead. What's the famous journalist, Dorothy
Can't remember that.
Kilgallen?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, she ended up dead. Also, Marilyn Monroe has been tied into that. There's a documentary, I think, called the Marilyn Monroe Tapes,
Yeah,
in which it
well, but
was.
but again, there's also again with similarly with these other cases that you mentioned, like the Skripals and the David Kelly, there are kind of theories within theories. Like people say that there's a
Yes.
conspiracy theory, but there's plenty of people who think that the Kennedy brothers were responsible for Marilyn Monroe's murder. So it's
If indeed she was murdered.
But I guess my point is, how can you really determine? You might be able to determine something, a theory is not correct, an
Yeah.
accident theory is not correct. Fine,
Yeah.
but the next step after that is quite hard to get to. Who did it, why they did it. Particularly when you say, actually, in some of these cases, there's things that, that even the standard conspiracy theory, which is quite thoroughly elucidated by people like Norman Baker or whatever, there's actually some further information that probably explains it all. So I guess that's why conspiracies can become quite frustrating after a while to me, because you're kind of working a world within a world.
Yes, and I suppose that's why it keeps people interesting. It's
Yeah.
like a puzzle that you can never solve.
So do you feel that you've solved any of these? Did you solve the
No,
politician one?
no,
Or
no. I
do you feel
mean,
that you added something new to the story that was sort of very uh, solid factual material to the politician case or any of
well,
the other?
that particular case you're talking about, the book has been shadow banned by Amazon UK, so
Ooh,
I might be onto something with that. But in that case,
post a
it's
link.
oh
Post a link
yes,
below.
see, yes, and please prove me wrong. Say, yeah, I'm in the UK and I can find it and buy it. That
Yeah,
would be good.
yeah.
But
Put a comment.
but as far as I know, it's been shadow banned because I wrote to Amazon asking, are you a robot? And it was saying, no, of course I'm not a robot,
Oh
but I
yeah,
think it was a robot.
yeah.
But it said, oh, we're very sorry about this. I'll make a report. But of course, nothing came of it. If you go straight onto my author page, you can find the book. But if you type the book and the ISBN number and the full title
Uh,
into the search bar, nothing comes up.
so
And
you
it,
literally, so anyone finding it has to literally find you first and go through all
yeah,
your, yeah, okay.
it's strange. But anyway, this was real because earlier I said I'm like an old school lefty. That this politician was like the real thing. He campaigned relentlessly against nuclear weapons, and he would also campaign on marginal issues that don't affect many people, like getting braille cards so blind people can vote. You know, just somebody who really cared about people
He
and
sounded like the Corbyn
dedicated.
of his day when I looked him up.
Yeah, exactly. Just somebody who really cared about people and spent their political career trying to help people, whether it was comparatively small things or the things that affect all of us. And this was an MP. He's called Bob Cryer, and he was MP in Yorkshire, um, and he became particularly interested in Menwith Hill, which is the infamous spy station used by supposedly GCHQ, but it's basically an American military
American base.
base
And it's in
run.
Yorkshire.
Yeah, and it's run by the NSA, and it enables communication with American spy satellites. And Cryer was actually supporting a lot of the protesters that were campaigning against Menwith Hill because at the time it wasn't very well known. And we were mentioning Norman Baker earlier. He was another politician that took up the cause, but Cryer was really in 1994, he'd given a speech in Parliament. I can't remember the technical name for it, the kind of speech that was given. But the defense minister, Jeremy Henley, if I'm remembering well, was absolutely not impressed with this and called Cryer basically a threat to British national security in the debate. And then within a month, Cryer was dead. He was driving down from Yorkshire to London after the parliamentary recess, and the car just overturned for no apparent reason. Some of the media reports at the time were inaccurate, saying that he'd gone through the crash barrier, which wasn't true. Um, but unfortunately, the waters are sort of closed over him rather quickly, and people nationally, people forgot about him. So not only was his legacy of human rights work forgotten, but the whole issue of Menwith Hill had lost that parliamentary representation. Because Cryer's basic point was that this is, the national security establishment working in a foreign country completely undemocratically with no oversight. And of course, putting American surveillance systems and missiles in Britain turned Britain into a target in case the Soviets had attacked, or Russia, as it became after the dissolution of the Union.
So this was
So
actually in the Blair, well, not the Blair era, but the this is when Tony Blair would have been leader of the Labour Party and under John Major.
just before then, so I think John Smith was the leader at the time.
Labour leader.
Uh,
Yeah,
he also died. People think
and he
that's a
died on the
conspiracy as
same
well.
year, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And he actually was on the steering committee of the infamous Bilderberg Group, which is
Yeah.
interesting.
But he was a goodie,
But,
wasn't he, John Smith?
well, if he was, that might have been why he was killed. But then he might not have been killed. You never know.
Mm.
It's what do they say now? Schrodinger's reality. The cat is both alive and dead, depending on who's observing it.
Yeah,
And
the cat in the box is both has been shot in the head and has had a mysterious heart attack at the same time.
yes, exactly. It is a conspiracy. It is an assassination, but it's also not. It depends on the observer.
Yeah. um, so this case of Bob Cryer, do you think that this was? Yeah, I thought it was in the 80s, but actually 1994, a little bit more recent.
94, yeah.
So is this are you how confident are you about that one, and how much new information do you think you were able to bring out in that book, which we will make sure is available on the
Yes, we're going to take on Amazon and right all the wrongs that have been done. Um, how confident? Oh, I would say, I don't know, 70, 80% that it was assassination because there were just too many big questions. I mean, I managed to, through freedom of information, I managed to get hold of the inquest papers. So I'm dealing with original source material.
Oh, good, yeah.
And I tried to interview a lot of people around Cryer and witnesses, and it was quite strange. Not one person wanted to talk to me. I managed to find his GP who didn't want to talk, and I don't know if it was because the staff were not passing on my messages, but the guy that conducted the autopsy never responded, and people you'd think would want to talk about it, like local peace activists, just the doors were closed, and some of the messages I got back were a bit disturbing. They were saying like, "Who are you and what do you want?" Even though I'd made clear who I was and what my
Mm.
intentions were. So I thought, did this, did this death create a chilling effect which is still lasting, or is it all just
It's lasting
coincidence?
over 30 years later.
Yes,
And again,
exactly.
that points to the power of, not to say these people were in on anything there, but it sounds like it points to the power of conspiracy theory as a label, that they don't even want to be associated in any way with even talking to someone who's writing a book about it. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. And
people are
again,
very worried about that kind of thing, aren't they? Any kind of association with conspiracy theory.
yeah, because it's been so weaponized and now so associated with the right that
Yeah.
it can so easily discredit any peace activism that to be labeled with that is a kind of figurative kiss of death. So, but anyway, it was. I managed to find from the inquest papers things that didn't make sense, like certain witnesses that the police recorded at the time, key witnesses who were never called to the final to the inquest to give evidence, and forensic reports that had gone missing. So
Hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So just to recap here for people who are watching, this is the second, I think, in a series of interviews I'm doing with people who have investigated conspiracies and propaganda in areas that I don't really know anything about, but feel I probably should. So, TJ, it's been great speaking to you. I think we'll try and keep the interview to within an hour if we can. Are there any other cases that you wanted to raise at this point?
well, I could just say that I first heard about Bob Cryer when I was looking into Robin Cook, who was the foreign
Yes.
secretary under Tony Blair. And in 2003, on the eve of the invasion of Iraq, Cook resigned from the Blair government in protest, and he was still an MP, but he wasn't in the government anymore. But many people assumed that he would try and get a cabinet position again once Blair quit.
Yeah.
But
He was a very well-respected parliamentarian. He was seen as the sort of leading light, wasn't he? Really, of the Labour Party.
Yes.
Perhaps not telegenic enough to ever become prime minister, but
Oh, I
someone
think he
who
was
was.
a beautiful man. But anyway, he actually died in 2005, a couple of years after the invasion, in rather odd circumstances. He was with his second wife, and they were climbing Ben Stack, it's called, a mountain in the northwestern part of Scotland, and he had supposedly died of a heart attack, but the questions, again, are all very, very vague. Did he die on the mountain? Did he die in the hospital? Did he die in the helicopter that took him to the hospital? And there was a mysterious witness, a hill walker, who had managed to call for assistance, but had never come forward. Now, the one of the telephone operators said the hill walker never gave their name, but that's to me a clue that something is wrong there, because some people just don't want publicity, so they wouldn't give their name to the media. I can understand that. It's rare, but it does happen. But in a professional situation where you're making an emergency call and you don't give your name to a medical telephone operator that's giving instructions on CPR, etc., that seems very unlikely to me. So I considered robbing.
Did the telephone operator actually ask for the person's name?
No, well, apparently, and because the media asked at the time, but they just said he never gave his name, so that would imply that they did, and that's part of training to ask who am I speaking to, and to
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
yeah. So that's that put a big question mark over the death. And similar story with Bob Cryer, really. None of the witnesses want to talk about it, and it's difficult to track anybody down. But
Isn't it the case? Aren't there some benign explanations there, though? I mean, if someone's had a heart attack on a hill, you're not going to press someone for their name, because he may well have just said, "Oh, I'm just a hill walker. How do I restart this man's heart?" I mean, I know what you mean. But those kind of things that in conspiracy theories there can be suspicions based on reasonable suspicion, but then you add that to another reasonable suspicion and then another one, and suddenly it looks like there's a case, but there might not be.
yeah, that's also why I find this whole subject quite fascinating, because you can ask what would actually stand up in a court of law and
Yeah,
what's just kind of hobbyism. So I
yeah,
think those, finding the lines to differentiate, that's quite interesting. But the point
yeah.
is, the telephone call, the hill walker spoke for 40 minutes. Now, can you really, 2005 technology, could you really get a signal on a mountain for 40 minutes and uninterrupted? And the telephone operator said it was uninterrupted. So I thought that was quite odd as well, an uninterrupted 40-minute call where they don't ask for this person's name. But the really,
I guess the way to test that would be to go up to
yes,
Ben
exactly.
Stack,
And
try and use a 2005 telephone
yeah, but
to
then you'd
call
have to
someone.
take down like 5G towers now, wouldn't you, to make it really, really historically accurate. But anyway, the media were reporting all sorts of things that weren't true. That Cook had fallen and broken his neck. Well, where did they get that from?
Mm.
Because the coroner said it had been death caused by hypertensive heart disease. There's nothing about a broken neck.
And he didn't have a heart attack and then fall off the cliff. He just had a heart attack and
No.
then fell onto the ground.
Well, he did. There was no falling down 8 feet, so it's a mystery where that came from. It's an
Maybe they're just
inconsistencies in the
hamming it up
story.
for the sake of the media.
Yeah, Now, if a paramedic, let's say, is doing that,
Tell a story.
that's really that should be investigated, because that's giving away. First of all, it's giving away sensitive medical information, unless they had permission from the family to do that, and it's also not obviously it's not professional to be lying like that.
No, I meant the
So,
media might have hammed it up. The media might have hammed it up to make the story more dramatic.
in which case, that would be a terrible indictment of the media, to when you have particularly such a high-profile figure and such an odd death as this, to be inventing
Jazzing it
stories
up.
like that. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, this death of a leading politician is not exciting enough. Let's make him fall down a cliff.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
but
Yeah.
the timing of it was Robin Cook had just written an article 3 weeks prior for The Guardian in which he confirmed, given his position as Foreign Secretary, he would have been in a position to read these files and documents to confirm this. He was the first politician that I know of to confirm that Osama bin Laden, who was supposedly the head of Al Qaeda, had actually been paid by the CIA. Now, researchers had known that before, but this is the first time a politician of that stature had actually been saying that. So some people wonder, was that the nail in the coffin, that was actually a matter of national security, and was it that killed him, if indeed he was killed, which we don't know, because
And
we're
wasn't
in.
that was also the article in which he said that Al Qaeda itself was just a name given to a group of loosely affiliated Islamic
Yes,
operatives, and they called it the base because it was part of a database. Is that right? The West called it Al Qaeda because it was part of their database of Muslim terrorists that they sometimes use.
exactly. And just a side note, the CIA seem to be using the same playbook, because now there's a far right fascist or Nazi group called the Base, and the Guardian
Right.
reported a few years ago that it's run by CIA people.
Yeah.
So
So that would be yeah, you got to keep an eye out for these things called the database, or
yes, it
if
seems
there's
to
an
be.
Islamic translation of something like called the PowerPoint, or
Yeah,
the Excel spreadsheet, then you know that it's probably a Western intelligence run organization. TJ, we're going to wrap up here, unless you've got any final thoughts, because we can keep that to a lovely hour.
all right. I'll
Uh,
zip it then and keep it to a lovely hour.
yeah. Okay. Very nice to speak to you. I'll put the links in the description, and I'll hopefully see you soon. Goodbye, everybody, and stay safe.